All right. Welcome, everyone. So this is part of the Startup Grind Boston Fireside Chat series. We're excited to host Leo Dassa and Leslie Hirshberg from LastMinute today. And we're going to be talking about how they're revolutionizing the healthcare scheduling system with their technology. We're going to learn more about their founder and startup journey, how they got to where they are today, and share insights for our community of entrepreneurs, technology builders, and everybody listening both live and on the YouTube recording afterwards. So, basically, Startup Grind is a startup community. Started out in Silicon Valley and spread to 200 different chapters around the world. This is part of the Boston chapter, and we like to feature local entrepreneurs, entrepreneurs and experts worldwide, and we host both virtual and in-person events. So with that, I'll start. Leo, if you want to give a quick introduction, and then we'll go to Leslie, and then kind of dive into some questions from there.
Yeah, awesome. I don't see anybody on, or am I just like talking to ghosts or?
No, we're just seeing the presenters on the
Oh, that's
screen here.
cool. Okay, nice. Very, very cool. Yeah, so hey, my name is Leo Dassa. I guess a little bit about me. You want me to just kind of talk about myself and then also the startup, Jason, or just?
Yeah. Just share a quick, introduction about you and LastMinute, and then, I have a bunch of questions we can dive into from there.
Yeah, I'll kind of give you the quick rundown. I try to keep things personal because I know in the past when I've heard CEOs talk, I'm like, why aren't they more personal? So, I went to University of Maryland, graduated from there, went and started a sales job in New York at a company called Yelp. After about 3 months of working there, my brother was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and I really used that to fuel my why. My brother, who was living in Boston at the time, he was a director of Gentle Dental in Brookline, Massachusetts. He would go in with the chemo pouch attached to him on Fridays and still do dental work to his patients. And I kind of said, okay, well, if he can do that, then why can't I go and do whatever is actually attainable and achievable at my job? And so I was the quickest promoted to help start the national sales team in Chicago at Yelp. I have a conference room named after my brother at Yelp in Chicago. And then from there, I joined another company, Gartner, in sales, did really well there, top sales rep there as well. And then went up to Boston because I decided I wanted to be near my brother. Work at the company called Rapid 7, did cybersecurity sales. I was in President's Club there, did very well there. And then I decided, okay, I want to actually be part of a startup. So I came and joined a company called Profitwell. I was there for their retain side. I think I was their second account executive who came on board, maybe third, I'm not sure. And I helped to build a repeatable process, which went really well. And then in August of 2020, my brother was diagnosed, or excuse me, my brother passed away from the cancer. And so I took some time away from work, from like official work, and I got my real estate license. I did sales consulting. I tried to learn a little bit. And then I decided, okay, let me go back into the startup world, did another cybersecurity startup. Um, and I think what I learned through that process was I don't want to, work for people anymore. If I can, I want to work for myself. And, if the company gets acquired or if the company does really well, I get to be the one that benefits and so forth. And I just wasn't sure what I wanted to, where that was or what I wanted to do. But Leslie, who's also my fiance now, I was able to learn through her just how broken the healthcare system was in staffing and scheduling. And I learned that, okay, nurses are getting so burnt out when people are getting, trying to call out last minute or trying to swap shifts. I could see the dread in Leslie's eyes. I remember I think it was at Legoland in California when she was getting these text messages, getting bombarded from her manager, from other nurses trying to swap with her, her manager's trying to get her a couple of last minute call outs. And so I just said to her, well, why isn't this solved in an app? And she said, I don't know, we just work with what we work with. So they were using Google Docs, Excel, spreadsheets, whatever it might be. And so I decided, okay, I'm going to go ahead and build something to make this better. Obviously, I was not the only one that came up with this idea. There are many other solutions out there, but that's kind of where the journey and story began to be able to, craft our way to create something that was a differentiator.
Amazing. And Leslie, would love to hear your perspective, coming from the nursing space as well, and yeah, what you
Yeah.
saw out there, and that led you to be a part of this as well.
Yeah, so I went to nursing school at the University of Delaware for my undergrad program. I started off in primary care at a community health center, and then right before COVID, I moved to Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston, Mass. Um, and yeah, that's kind of where my nursing journey started, realizing that, when the nurses are understaffed or people are calling out and trying to swap shifts, that's like where issues start. And when we're understaffed, it just puts more stress on the nurses and we have to do more. And kind of like Leo said, I was like, yep, this is what it is. This is what we have to deal with. It's part of the job. Um, but then Leo, like he said, he was wondering like why this isn't solved and why I had to go through a 10-page PDF trying to swap shifts with people, email them and say, hey, can we
Right.
swap? Can I swap my Wednesday shift with your Tuesday shift? And just sending a bunch of emails and yeah, when Leo had this idea, I wasn't initially like on board because I figured, it's just how we do it. We just deal with what we have. There's no solution. But over time, I was like, no, this is something that we need and that I would benefit from. So I want to be a part of it.
Oh, yeah, I want to touch on the last piece you mentioned too, because I mean, I imagine there's kind of mixed feeling, like there's some hospitals that are a lot more open to innovation, and obviously, there's also differences in personalities with nurses, hospital administrators, everyone involved, in terms of, do we stick with the standards and procedures we've done for 20 years or 50 years, or do we go with something new that can actually make a difference? And how has that journey been in terms of, like, actually breaking in and making connections and getting feedback from people in the industry?
I'll just start by saying that I feel like nurses in general in that whole industry is like 10 to 15 years behind other industries. Like you said, they're slow to adopt, slow to change. So it's really hard to get them on board. And then Leo, I'll kind of let him take over because he's like more of like the sales side.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, thank you. How has it been? I mean, I think that because of my experience in sales and understanding how to get meetings, that's been really beneficial. We've gotten a lot of hospitals that have been interested. Ultimately, there was just a lot, and I can talk more about it, that I learned my first year doing my startup versus my second year doing my startup. Um, People, for the most part, want to support not necessarily startups, but want to support, the initiative to make things better. I mean, I think if you really have a very candid conversation with these nurses, I hate to put, Leslie out there, but like I tell Leslie this all the time. If I contact her and she was a CNO of a hospital, she would just not give me the time of day because she's just like very, very stubborn and fixated with what she has. But there's a lot of people that are not like that and there's a lot of people like that, which is fine. But there's also a lot of people not like that who are saying to themselves, how can I make things better for my staff? How can I think about the long term staff satisfaction, patient satisfaction, and so forth? So they're always thinking, how do we make things better? Like they're not, you know what I mean? There's so many things that are keeping them up at night. So if they can make something better and we can kind of do the heavy lifting for them, they're usually pretty open to it. We've talked with some of the top health systems in the country. We have a pilot coming up with the top 10 health systems. So there is room there, but it's just the way I kind of like to put it is the harder you work, the luckier you get.
Right. I like that. And there's always this challenge, and I'm sure many of our community members face this as well, in terms of, um, do you go after the big logos first? And, they're the ones that, when all the other hospitals see, you're working with, I don't know, a Brigham and Women's or a Cleveland Clinic or something, they got that recognition and want to follow, but the sales cycle might take longer? Or do you go after, you know, um, a smaller group first that might be more willing to try something out and get on board? Like, what has your philosophy been on that?
I think there's a pro and a con to both. I think when you go with a smaller hospital, um, it's not as organized. So yes, you can get things in there quicker. And I think a lot of people say that that's like the better way to go. From my experience, I actually think going the like taking longer and getting in with the larger health system is better, because once you're in there, all the CMOs of not when I talk about health system, I mean, you think of like Johns Hopkins, for example. I think everybody knows that
Right.
name. I'm not saying we're working with them, but I'm just giving that example. Or MGB, right there in Boston. They have hospitals underneath them. So their health system, and then there's MGH, and then there's Brigham Women's, and then there's Williams, whatever it's called, Faulkner, I think. Is that right, Leslie?
Yeah.
William
Brigham and
Faulkner?
Women's Faulkner.
Whatever. They change the names. They're getting in fights all the time. So but I think the whole point is that like each of these large health systems have like 10, 11 hospitals underneath them. And when you're going in there and you're meeting with the CIO, the chief innovation officer, and then you're getting buy-in from different, from the different locational chief medical officers or chief nursing officers, right? They're called the kind of those are like the hospital ones. And then there's the system CNO who oversees all of those CNOs. When you have something with that much, I guess, bureaucracy, and you're able to actually navigate through it and get buy-in, once the current starts going a certain way, it's hard for one person to just start pushing towards another direction. Even think about yourself, Jason, right? You're the CEO, you're one of the co-founders of your company. If everybody comes to you and they're like, I think we want to use this solution, are you really going to say, well, I think I'm going to be the jerk here? And like, you can push back a little bit, but if everybody's super excited, it's going to be hard
Right.
to go against that current. And they have a lot more money to spend. They have a lot more support to give. They have a lot more system in place to ensure that you can actually learn from those findings of a pilot and ensuring that you can scale it. Otherwise, if it's successful, they'll go and they'll help you refer you to other hospitals as well. So I think what I'm learning over time is initially the small hospitals were exciting because you could get them done quicker, you could get the credit card on file. But I think the large health systems, if you can get in, that's a big if, and a lot of companies can't. And like I say, I think we got lucky. The harder you work, the luckier you get. Then you're setting yourself for a lot more success.
No, that's great advice, and yeah, definitely makes sense. And yeah, like that, the approach you laid out there. In terms of where those relationships you built up, and just even talking to both customers and prospects along the way, like, has the initial product you laid out and the vision for it changed along the way, or is it pretty similar to what you came up with when you first started this company?
Oh my gosh, night and day. I mean, when we first started, we created this, we can call it V1 platform. And we've had like so many different engineers part of the company, and now we have one we're really excited about, who's been here for about a year. He's really continuing to move up the ranks here. But we had there was just so many different things that we learned, especially the first year. Like for instance, the first person, which we don't want to name, the first person built the code in Svelte. And then when they departed, no one else knew how to build on top of Svelte. So we had to rebuild the whole platform. But luckily, we didn't just have to rebuild the whole platform just for no reason. We learned that there was a lot of things that we built in the initial platform that weren't that great. So for instance, the first year I was just listening to people's problems and they were telling me their features. And instead of just listening to the problems, I was trying to build their features that they wanted. And I was having engineers do that, and it was overload for everybody. And we were just trying to be kind of this platform, I guess, if you will, where every feature that we built was good. We had AI, scheduling and AI chatbot, all of these things that were good, but nothing was amazing. And as a startup, you have to build that one feature, at least initially, that you are amazing at, that no one is better, that no $20 billion conglomerate can do better than you. So the first year we built this platform, everything was good. And then when we went to large health systems or even small hospitals, they were like, yeah, no, this is great. And we like you. We like the team. We like Leslie. We like Leo. We like the engineers. But that's not going to get us over that's not going to make us spend money with you. What's going to make us spend money is seeing the differentiator and what you're going to do that's different. So then we went on site this past year. It was an accelerator, Techstars, that partnered with Northwestern Medicine, and we can't get too far into it, but we learned just how off we were by trying to build this platform, and decided, let's build this workflow, let's build this feature that we're the best at, and then earn our right to be able to build other features that we can then be the best at. Because you only have so many resources. So the first year, it's like you're going through it, you're a startup founder, you're stubborn, you're like, I'm going to prove everybody else wrong. Like I'm going to do this even though no one else could do it, I'm going to do it. And then you humble yourself the second year, if you can even make it there, and you realize, holy crap, I was doing this all wrong, mostly wrong, because that's what you do. You just continuously do things that are wrong. And then you course correct. And then the third year, which hasn't come up yet, I'm sure the same thing's going to happen where I'm going to say, oh my gosh, what was I thinking? I did this wrong. Let me course correct this. So it was a huge difference, and something that I can tell this audience, as much as they want to hear it, and I've heard it from others, you won't know until you experience it. But if you're lucky enough and fortunate enough to experience it, you'll know exactly kind of that feeling, just like you do, Jason.
Right. No, I think, yeah, I love that story because, obviously, completely different space, but I like to use the example of Instagram story a lot where, they had a ton of features in the first version, and then they said, you know what, people really just seem to care about the filters that we built, and they leaned heavily into that. And then, now they have a lot more tools and, things that they got once they built up their system. But it sounds like, the workflows were that for you, and, got people excited that this is the best platform doing, clinical workflows we can tap into and be a part of. So I think that's a great experience. And I guess, how do you go through, or like, is it still hard to kind of tune out the noise and the requests for other things, or are you pretty just, laser focused on sticking with your current plan?
Yeah, so this health system that we're about to kick off the pilot with, they were initially interested in doing an integration with some of their HRIS and scheduling solutions so we could layer on top of it. And we looked into it. We spent a lot of time. We probably spent like 2 weeks of our time with my head of engineering here to looking into it, figuring out how much it would cost. Do we need a specialized integration engineer? And we realized, okay, we're going to really need this hospital be on board to be able to help us build out this integration. And we thought long term this was something that would make sense. I think, again, like a year ago, I would have said we have to do this. This is something we need to do. I ended up going back to the hospital and I said, look, is this something that you need? Because if it's not something that you need, why don't we come back to it? Let's just build whatever is the minimum thing you need. And that's another great thing about working with a large health system. They understand that. They've worked with startups before. But let's just build the minimum thing you need. And that's like anybody who knows me would know, like, that is such a painful thing for me to say. And, from there we can not course correct, but we can build up from there. We can always build up. We don't want to build, down. So it's something that we still kind of struggle with. And it's something where when we're talking to a health system or a hospital or, a healthcare facility, and they say, we want to do this. Do you have this? No, we don't have this. It's something that we'll consider doing if other hospitals or other healthcare facilities are requesting it, but we don't. This is what we have. This is something that we have on the, on the roadmap. I always bring my engineer on to be able to make sure that I'm not incorrectly speaking to the timeline of the roadmap, because they understand it better than I do from an engineering capacity. So that's something that you're always going to struggle with, and you need to be able to level set with the customer and say, this is where we are now. This is where we, think we're going to be in the future, but, we want you to be part of us because of where we are now. And also, the potential of the future, but not because of where we will be in the future.
Right.
It's so great to see it, like, Leo at this place, because like he was saying, when we first started, if a hospital wanted a feature, Leo was like, yes, we will do it. This is great. And me as a nurse, I'm like, oh yeah, that sounds great. Like, we definitely need that. Like, I would benefit from it. My coworkers would love this. Like, this sounds great. But then when you bring the engineers in and they're like, yeah, we can build this and we can also build up those other 20 features. Like, sure, it sounds great, but it's easier said than done. So seeing us here now where Leo's like, yes, you want to be great at one thing. It's like, it's so great to be at this position where that's where we're at versus we'll do whatever you want, because it's just not feasible and it doesn't lead to a great product.
And another thing, oh, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to ask Leslie on that. Like, how has your perspective changed along the way from, being the user and being the expert on the nurse side to kind of, seeing how the back end or how the decision-making processes work in the hospitals, and like, has any of your perspective on like how to make the business successful changed along the way?
Yeah, like I think as a nurse, like I was saying, it's easy to say, well, why doesn't this product have this feature and that feature? But then as on the other side, being part of the team, I can see that it's not the way it's done. You can't just build a product with 100 features. You have to start somewhere. So I can see how it's hard to get buy-in from hospitals, from the nurse side and from like being on the last minute side. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, Leo, did you want to add something?
I was going to say that being a great CEO, or first of all, there's a difference with being a great CEO and being a great founder. But I think that being a great founder is being resilient, being persistent, like not taking no for an answer, just being extremely stubborn. Like yesterday, we were trying to put together the couch because we just moved into a new place, and Leslie's parents were like, "Just leave it alone, Leo." And we all tried doing it together, and we couldn't figure it out. And then I was just like, I'm gonna figure it out. I'm not leaving until I figure this out." And it really should not have been figured out yesterday. And I was able to figure it out just because I just kept on hammering at it. I think that's being a great founder. I think being a great CEO, if you long term don't, decide that you don't want to step down in the future, is building people around you who are better than you at everything else that you can't do great. So my superpower is sales, everything else is not. So bringing on somebody who's a clinical expert like Leslie, bringing on somebody who really, really knows engineering, the ins and outs of, like our engineering team, even starting to bring on designers as long as you have the budget for it, who know designing better than the engineers. That is what I think makes for building a great company and being a great CEO.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you've always been like out there looking for this, feedback and people you can learn from. I mean, you went through one of our Prepare for VC
Yeah.
programs, the Antler program, the Techstars, you've been like trying to absorb as much of, the knowledge out there as possible. So like, I guess what are some of the like key themes or takeaways from programs and your learning experiences you've implemented into the business?
I mean, I think first of all, it's really important to network, right? Get to know the other founders. Everybody wants to see each other succeed. If you don't, then just don't surround yourself with those people. But I think most people don't realize that people want to see others succeed around them, right? We all know the struggle. We all know what we're giving up and what we're sacrificing to do to make this happen. There's room for everybody to succeed. So I think really make sure that you're staying in touch with other founders that you meet. I'm still not that great at this. Luckily, people are very receptive when I do reach out to them. So I think that's the first thing. When you go into these programs, for the most part, not 100%, and they might get mad at me for saying this, but for the most part, they do know more than you, right? They've been through this. They've coached up startups, like nonstop startups, whether it's Prepared for VC, Techstars, Antler. They know how to do this better than me, 10x, 100x. So this is where it's important to not be as stubborn and be able to lean in to what they are telling you that is the right thing to do when you have different scenarios or things that come up to be able to progress the startup. I do also think that you should have that one thing that you can say, no, I'm going to do it my way. Like, for instance, mine is sales, right? So if somebody tries to tell me a certain way, I don't care. I know how to do it. I'm going to do it this way. And I might miss a percent versus 99% of the shots whatever that you don't take or whatever the saying is, because I didn't do it this certain way. But I think that's really important. But then also for the things that you really just don't know much about, I think it's important to zoom out and to just hear out what people are saying. And for the most part, listen to them and take their feedback. And I think that's what's kind of what happened with all the different programs. Even when I got into pickles, they've been so helpful. And that includes you, Jason. So I think that that's a really, really important thing when you're going through these programs.
No, I think that's a great mindset of, learning. I mean, you want to stay strong, but, you're not going in the program for sales because you're already an expert there. So it's building up the other categories. And I think even, one of the benefits, at least, my perspective is like, there's a lot of things, you're learning, whether it's through that or, other resources and conversations that, things you can immediately apply, and then things that are, thinking about, oh, when we get to this point down the road, this is something we have to figure out. But the main thing as an entrepreneur is like eliminating all the things, or as many of the things as possible that you're getting blindsided by not even thinking it could be a potential problem to look out for. So, I think, the more, you can kind of, and you've done this, which is great, get exposure to, you don't have to be the best at every single aspect of your business, but you know enough about the technical capabilities to like have those conversations with your engineer and lead the direction of that. And, you know enough about the clinical side to talk to Leslie and get her perspectives and build everything out for, for your customers there as well. And yeah, so I guess my question off of all of this is like, have there been any instances where, the ideas coming from the team, like, clash in the direction that you want to go, or has it been pretty cohesive on the vision so far?
I think there's definitely clashing that happens all the time. It's just about doing it respectfully. I think that that's really important, on all ends. Um, I
Yeah.
tell people, and I'm not going to say the name, but we were on a meeting, and I was running the meeting, and our designer was on, and I was kind of like politely pushing back, saying we need to do this, and the designer was like, "No, we're going to do this," and it really like humbled you for a second because you realize, wow, the only cool thing about being a CEO is the title. People don't really care. They're just like, no, no, no. And you're like, okay, all right, I guess it only matters in the corporate world when you're a billion-dollar company. So I think that there will always be clashing, and you just have to do it respectfully. Yeah, I mean, like I've had clashing with my engineering team. I've had clashing with Leslie. Leslie's had clashing with the engineering team. But I mean, it's different when it's conflict and when it's like, let's try to talk this out and figure out how do we, work through this.
Right. Um, yeah, no, and I think I like your emphasis on, doing it respectfully because, I mean, yeah, ultimately, you're looking to implement what's the best decision for the business. And so are, everybody else on the team. You're going to have different views on what that is. And, it's kind of taking it all into account and making the final decision there.
You want people to disagree with you, right? Like if you're building a team, you want to be able to have people tell you what they don't agree with or what they agree with, because otherwise you're just building blindly, thinking that you're doing all the right things, and then you're wasting 6 months or a year or whatever it might be. So I
Yeah.
think like I will say my first year was a lot less, was just like people who were just kind of yesing me, and I was just building blindly. And then the second year was more of like, okay, let's actually all just keep each other accountable and make sure that we treat everybody the same level of respect. At this level, the hierarchy doesn't matter as much. So I think that that's really important.
What do you look for now when you're adding people to the team?
Um, it's funny. I used to look for people who would like, you know, want to work endlessly and so forth. I think that's what's really important as the founder is that you make sure that you're the hardest working person there. Um, I think it's good to have people who have a certain skill set that is like their superpower, I guess, if you will. And also at the same time, who like to do things outside of just work. Like for me, whether it's going on the Peloton, building Legos, Leslie likes going for walks and drinking coffee. I like to make that joke. But it's like you want to be able to have somebody who's part of the team who has a personality. Like one of the guys on our engineering team, I love the Ravens, he loves the Lions, and we just, we kind of go back and forth about that. It's fun to be able to talk about work, but also be able to kind of keep like create like a family in the company as much as you can. The more you are, again, building your startup, you realize that it really is the bottom line is the money and the number. Um, but I also think it's nice to be able to build people around you who you want to work with. So I think the number one thing is, do you want to work with these people? Because if you don't want to work with them, then you're just going to be miserable.
Yeah, no, I think, yeah, the relationship is super important in any venture. And, yeah, again, you're building something. I mean, it's different than, I mean, obviously it's important in a job as well, but it's even more crucial in a startup where you're scaling something together and, building the future of the business.
Yeah.
So how is, or trying to think how to phrase it, like, have there been any, challenges or like things you've had to implement in your own relationship together, like kind of working together and living together? I guess has it been tough at all, or what have you done to kind of keep the startup and the relationship either separate or like make sure things don't cross over from one to the other?
I feel like we try to keep it separate sometimes, but it just all blends together. I feel like there was one time we were like, we should do date nights and not talk about work, but it's
Yeah,
impossible. I
naturally
think it all just
works out.
blends.
I think, yeah. I mean, I think like the way that people are in relationships, it's important to separate that from the way they are as colleagues. Like, yes, Leslie and I, we have a relationship and we can push back on each other a little bit more. I think that where there has been like struggle, and like I'm happy to openly talk about it, is like saying, hey, we need to do this. And then Leslie needs to, as one of the executives and co-founders, by example, lead by example, and show people that she's not just gonna, when she says she's going to do something, next week, she's not just going to say, "Oh, I couldn't do it because I was working my nurse shift." And I'm not like throwing her out there. I'm saying that's with anybody, right? I'm not saying that she's even done that. I'm just saying I think it's important as all co-founders and executive team, especially as the company gets bigger, to not say, "Oh, well, I have a free pass, because I'm Leo is my partner. I can like kind of, you know what I mean, sit back a little bit more." So I think that we've had to have conversations where it's like, hey, if you're just not able to kind of execute on this, then we have to figure out a way to either support you with somebody else to do that, or figure out, what do we do there. And the nice thing is that Leslie's been very amicable in understanding that, we have to do what's best for the business, because at the end of the day, because we are partners, whether the business succeeds, with or without her, or with or without me, we, you know, pretty much, I mean, to a sense, share that same slice of the pie. So if the company becomes a $50 million company, if I'm out of job building Legos, or she's out of job going on walks, drinking coffee, you know, we're
Right.
okay with that.
Yeah. No, that's a great perspective. Cool. And yeah, you shared a lot of great advice on kind of your strategy getting into new places, figuring putting the importance on the people you work with, kind of taking everything in on the mentorship side. Is there anything else, like, I mean, looking back, you wish you knew day one or year one? What I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of things, but like anything you want to highlight for the audience that would have helped you figure things out quicker if you knew like one or two things earlier on?
Yeah, I think or Leslie, do you want to go first?
You can go first.
I think the biggest thing is, and it's such a hard thing, but you have to roll with it, is it's so dynamic. Like, you're truly building this superpowered jet in the sky without a parachute, and you have to change the engine while it's in the sky. And you have to be okay with that. Like, you have to be okay with the fact that if you fall and hit the ground, you're going to die. But you have to keep on changing the engine, or building things, or like putting a new engine on the wing. And you don't get the luxury of being on land, with like multiple different people, and, having all that support. You're just like, this is where we thought we were going to go. We thought we were going to go to 10,000 feet above air, and we thought we were going to go to whatever, New Mexico, and now we're above New York, and we have to do something about that to keep staying flying high until we get to Montana. So I mean, I think that if people can't do that, then you're gonna have a tough time. And I think I've had tough times with like finally coming to the like realization that everything that you're doing is just like, there's every single week you might change the decision to the business and how what the outcomes are. So I mean, I think it's like, if I could give one thing of like I wish I knew, was I really thought that if I just do my sales thing, we would be in a good spot. And then what I realized is that it doesn't matter. Like I can do that great, I can do that terribly, whatever it is. It depends on the timing. But it really is like really lean into as much as you can the fact that the plane is going to go in all different directions. It might fly with a hurricane, and you have to just make sure that you're holding on to that wing for dear life until it is calm again. And then you can't even sit on top of the wing. You have to start, like I said, like changing mechanics inside of it and figure out a way to continue to refuel the jet, so you can't, you just can't, you'd never really get a chance to actually land.
Yeah, I think very similarly to that, you have to be willing to change. Like you have to be dynamic, cannot be static. If we were still with that first idea, I don't even know if we would be here today. So you have to be willing to change, hear from others, take their advice, and say, okay, like I love this idea. I thought it was great. I thought it was going to change the world. Maybe it's not. Maybe I should change it and listen to others. I think also reaching out to people, like Leo said, networking is so important. Know that you don't know everything and know who to reach out to and like form those relationships and connections. Because then when they have sales questions, they'll reach out to Leo. If they have clinical questions, they'll reach out to me. So just keeping your network and knowing who to trust and who to ask those questions to, and just taking people's advice because you don't know everything. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's great advice. Have your goals for the business changed along the way?
Has our goals for the business changed? Yes, I
Like
think
if I asked you,
yeah, no, no,
a
no.
few years ago, what the 5-year plan was, does it look different than today?
The thing is, I even tell investors this. I'm not sure, if we want to get acquired for 50 or $100 million, if we want to be $1 billion company. If you build $1 billion company, all eyes are going to be on you. People are going to find ways to cancel you. Like there's just always going to be things. I almost kind of wonder what is that amount to build the company to where you can then just like kind of set off to the sunset and fly off the radar. But also like you want to work on something that's yours forever. So I mean, but you don't want to just be stagnant. Like you don't want to just not grow the business because you're like, I'm happy where I am. Unless you truly feel that way, then that's called like a lifestyle business. I think I initially was thinking, let's do a lifestyle business. Then I realized let's actually build something that we can build that's huge. And maybe one day I won't even be the CEO, which is like totally fine because it's a super stressful thing the bigger you get. Um, and like also like kind of coming to terms with that pride thing, right? Like it's like a lot of people just want to be like, oh, it's my business, I want to be the CEO forever. And I'm like one of the most stubborn people that this podcast will probably ever see, and I'm even realizing that like, you sometimes just have to put your ego to the side. So um we're still kind of like figuring that out. I mean, I think like obviously an acquisition would be great from a larger company. Getting it to IPO would also be great. But if the end of the world is that we somehow are at a place where we can just only afford to pay the mortgage plus or minus a few dollars, if you're doing something you love, you never work a day of your life. So, I mean, you don't want to push it too far where you lose grip and lose your dream that you built for investors that just don't really care other than just making this like a money machine, factory, I guess, if you will.
Sure. Yeah, great perspective.
Leslie?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you first started, you're like, we're going to sell this for $50 million. It's going to change the face of healthcare. I'm like, that sounds amazing. Let's do it. Like, and then, reality sets in. You're like, okay, we have to scale back. We're not the only ones with this idea. We're just a small team. We don't have any money yet. So I think we started off really big and then we kind of got more realistic as time went on. And like Leo said, I think the bigger the company, the more stress, the more pressure on you. And I don't think either of us really want that. And if you do, then that's great. Grow your company big. But I think you have to be realistic and look at your life and kind of think about what you want. And like Leo said, if it's a lifestyle brand or something more small that's easily manageable, great. And if it's something where we're able to sell and then, can step down and kind of relax and not feel the stress, also great. So kind of seeing where it goes.
I will say with that though, that to build a great company, you have to be unrealistic. If you want to just be realistic, just go into the corporate world and sell or something, you know? So like when I say the realistic thing, I kind of, to me, I more so think like, what is it that I want at this time that actually is going to allow me to have that happiness? It's not about the realistic for me. It's more about what makes me happier. Is it having that unrealistic goal of $100 million company, $1 billion company, and like what does that stress mean? You know, like there's an interview with that NVIDIA CEO, and they say, "What's the biggest advice you have?" And you say, "Don't do a startup." You know, nobody really actually understands what that means. They're like, "Oh, well, he has $1 billion and he lives in a in a really big house and so forth." But like they don't understand the health that comes with it. Like my best friend, who's also a startup founder, we talk all the time about how we're probably going to die earlier than other people because of how stressful this job is. So I mean, I think it's like more so thinking about what's your priority, and and then going from there. But like for instance, regarding the investors, we have an investor that we're looking at bringing on who I have known for 2.5 years and didn't take money before that, because I think it's really important to think about who you want on your cap table. Because once you get somebody on your cap table, you can't get them off. Depending on the timeline, nothing against like a Sequoia or A16Z. I'm sure they're great, but like once somebody like that takes a chunk of your cap table, I mean, you've pretty much lost the company, in my opinion. I could be wrong. Don't legally hold me to that. But I'm just saying, I think even emotionally, like you've lost grip of the company. So it's like take the small steps, figure out who you want to invest in you. Don't just bring on investors, bring on partners, bring on people who you want to back you. And think about like, what do you want? Like, are you okay with, living a little bit less longer and being this big shot? Or are you okay with maybe not getting acquired for as much, but living a little bit of a longer life and getting more time to spend with your kids? I don't know the answer, but you can't do both. You just can't.
Yeah. No, and I like, you've kind of centered around the theme of the relationships and the people you bring in matter. If it's, you talked about that on the team side and, on the investors as well. They are, when they buy into your cap table, they are part of the company now. So yeah, making sure, you're working with both, whether it's, even if it's a fund, it's still individuals at the fund you're working with. And yeah, kind of making sure you align on those goals and strategies there. So yeah, in terms of kind of ask a couple final questions here. So in terms of basically sorry, in terms of advice for founders, sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second. Yeah, in terms of founders going, oh yeah, so you just shared the NVIDIA example, and I mean, we've seen a lot that a lot of these companies are seen as overnight success, but it takes a lot of hard work, sweat, mental health, and dedication to get there. I guess what would the moment be, whether or not you've already had this, where you said, this is all worth it because I see somebody, I don't know, I see a nurse using this. I see, like, what's that for you in terms of the like product goal you want to see out there, or the change you want to make that you see out in the world?
Yeah. I mean, I think, Leslie, do you want to go first or do you want me to?
I can go. I
Yeah.
think it would be really cool for me to be able to be using this app as a nurse at my job, wherever that is. I feel like that would be an exciting moment. To have people on my floor using it to swap shifts, to call out last minute, to find coverage, to move nurses around. I think that'd be really cool to be using it wherever I am working.
Perfect. And yeah, Leo, what is it for you?
So are you asking like kind of like what's like the turning point and what's like pushed me forward? Is that kind of your question?
Yeah, whether or not you
Okay.
feel like you've had this already, like what's that
Yeah.
I've made it moment for you?
I mean, it's so funny because when I'm talking sometimes to VCs and they're like, we know you're going through a lot, I just start bursting out laughing, which is probably unprofessional because I'm just like, like you have to hide it. But the truth is that this is such a stressful thing. I mean, like I've had moments where I've cried. I'll say that vulnerably on here, recorded. That's totally fine. I've had moments where I wanted to quit, where I like really, really, really wanted to quit, and I was just like, I can't because I'm too like stubborn or something's wrong with me or I'm broken or something where I'm just like, I'm gonna push through it. And then even just moments from like other people who have been very successful and even like moderately successful who say the biggest thing is just don't quit. The only way you guarantee you fail is if you quit. I've stuck with that since day one. And I think that's like a very true thing. And that might be like a bad thing. Um, I think that ultimately, like what has pushed me forward is realizing that I'm doing something that I truly believe has a purpose and is going to make things better for people. And seeing that there continues to be, even when we're like, we feel like we're running out of, dry on the well, somebody comes by and wants to invest in us or wants to give us an opportunity to build this company out or build something innovative like that top 10 health system. And so I think ultimately, like what you feel and what you do is very different. And that's something that I need to continue to remind myself. You're allowed to feel like you just want to, call the IRS and shut down the business the next day
Right.
because something bad happened. But what you do is very, very different than what you feel. So I think like I've had definitely like those ups and downs, and I will continue to have it, and they won't ever stop, But most of us, we just hide that because we think it's the cool thing to do, which is fine. But I think ultimately you just have to, like what I've learned, and the kind of the breaking point or the kind of inflection point that I've came to was, um, you just have to push through. Something my mom, she has cancer now as well. And something that she has said is you have to know when to hold and you have to know when to fold. And I think that comes true in a lot of things, even in a startup, but less so, but like even just in life. But you do have to know when to hold and know when to fold. But it doesn't necessarily mean you fold the business. It means you have to pivot. You have to figure out another problem that is out there that you can find a solution to. Don't fall in love with your idea. Fall in love with the problem.
Right. And yeah, I think I mean that's one of the reasons, I enjoy the communities, we have, and you mentioned with all the groups you've been involved into. I think if you're not part of any startup community or don't have friends that have startups too, like it can be pretty easy to just look at the companies that make the headlines and their whatever billion-dollar startups that are featured and be like, why isn't this me and why is it so difficult? But when you're actually out there, talking to people that are going through the same ups and downs as in the startup life, and realizing, hey, I'm not the only one that's going through this. Everyone is. And this friend was going through this a month ago, and now they had a big break and they're off to the races. And my next big break will come, and you have the ups that kind of keep you motivated and going, and the challenges you turn to each other and figure out what to do and how to keep motivated and keep going there. So
I
yeah, that's
agree.
I'm hoping that's one of our goals of the community, is like letting people have those conversations, even sharing conversations like this. We're again, recording, we're going to put it on our YouTube and share it out with our newsletter, and have everybody learn from you, and have people reach out, and you get to have conversations, learn from them as well, and that's all part of this ecosystem.
It only takes 10 years for an overnight success. Just remember that.
Exactly. So you're well on the way here.
We appreciate it. Well, yeah, if anybody has any other questions, I'm happy to, where I can, make time. I hate saying that because I used to not, but we're kicking off this pilot. Very excited. We want to make sure that, it's not a failure, and that it's successful. So, but wherever we can support, reach out to me, reach out to Leslie. It's always a pleasure being able to give back to the community. We love the Boston community. it's a love-hate, but it's a place where so many great startup founders, start from. So yeah, if you have any other questions or anything else we can do to provide support, please let us know.
Perfect. Yeah, really appreciate you both taking the time especially after your move all day yesterday. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, again, I'll share this with everybody that signed up and was part of our community. And yeah, happy to. What's the best can I share your LinkedIn's, or what's the best
Yeah,
place?
yeah, LinkedIn. I'd say LinkedIn. Share Leslie's LinkedIn as well. I think you have that. If they're super duper persistent, you can give them my email.
Sounds good.
Okay.
All right. Perfect. No, I appreciate both of your time today, and thanks again for speaking with us and sharing your story.
Thanks so much,
Thank you
guys.
also.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.